It started with a game.
If everyone would like just bag the noise and play like we could do this.
Sonny, name one thing that's gotten better in the last 10 years.
Shall we play a game?
Video games.
All right, I acknowledge that.
Totally awesome video game!
I want to make this video because I think it will be of use to people who are brand new to narrative design, people who maybe are watching my videos and kind of following them step by step. Because in those videos, I encourage you to create your own portfolio of interactive fiction using the process that I lay out, and using a free tool called Twine. And there are other tools like it, but Twine is this free tool that you can use to create interactive stories. Now, I thought of this because, as I mentioned, every once in a while I'll have someone reach out to me and wanting to know how to become a narrative designer, or even just, how narrative design works. And not long ago, before I created this channel, a young man named Carlos reached out to me. Carlos gave me his permission to use his name and tell the story. Great young guy, filled with enthusiasm. Really liked talking to him. I want to say we had 2 meetings and have exchanged some emails. And I did point him to a blog post I wrote where I outlined the process some. I think, the videos do a better job, despite all my, clumsy attempts at teaching. But, and then I pointed him to Twine. I said, okay, so you have at least a clue, a process to sort of lean on, and you've got Twine. Now you've got to have some interactive fiction in your portfolio. He had some writing. He's done a lot of playwriting, and but you got to have some interactive fiction. That's the job you're looking for. So I didn't hear from him for a while. I think he was working away on a story, and then I heard from him, and he sent me an email, and it was basically saying, "What? I'm using this Twine stuff. I'm getting into it. Am I a programmer now? Are we programming here? What's going on?" I love it. I love the honesty there of his, wanting to know what is this? I want to be a writer of interactive fiction. I don't want to program. And it was funny because it reminded me of a similar situation. I want to say about a little less than 20 years ago. And I was working at a studio, and I had only been in games for 1 or 2 years. And I was working on a game, and this particular game needed a lot of writing. It was the first game I'd worked on. I was a game designer. It was my title. But the first game that I ever worked on that needed a lot of writing. And so we hired a young person to come on board and help me with the writing. And, so we hired, a young guy, and it wasn't his first job out of college, but it was maybe his second, and the first one was kind of a brief, maybe a contract affair. And so here he is, very, very funny guy, had talent, very talented. But here he is, trying to learn the ropes in the video game industry and just learn the ropes in general of like working in a full-time job at an office. And I could see it was a transition for him. I was about 7 years older. I am 7 years older. And wasn't very mature at the time, but I had at least a sense of, I'd worked in some office environments before, and I was a game designer. So I knew, I knew the tool. I knew what being a game designer was, right? Working with tools to create, experiences for the player. Often a tedious job, rewarding, but tedious. So anyway, we spent a long time working together, writing scripts, coming up with stories, fun characters. We're writing in Excel and in Word, and eventually we got past all that, and it was time to record the audio and then put all the stuff in the game, which meant that we had to go in there with the tools and do all the blocking and create all the create cinemas. We had to implement the cinemas in the game. Again, a tedious job. It's just putting the characters in the scene, making sure that the audio triggers correctly and the animations trigger correctly and all that stuff. And the tools could be kind of buggy and crash sometimes, and you might have to go into the files and do some editing of the code that was in there. And the young man we hired really did not want to do it. He was like, "This is not what I signed up for. I'm a writer. I want to write. Just let me write." Well, we don't have any more writing to do. So we weren't really, our title wasn't writers. We're game designers. We got to do a lot of writing, but now we have to do the work of the game designer. And he was, I think, just very frustrated with the process. And I do remember trying to help, but again, I wasn't very mature either. It had a happy ending. This person went on to kind of figure it out and start doing the work of a game designer, and is today a narrative director and extremely talented, and one of my best friends. But it was just so funny how the two how just Carlos and this young person 20 years apart had the same concern, right? I'm a writer. What are we doing here? Well, as you'll see if you'll mess with Twine or something similar, I mean, your game is going to have its own logic. You're going to offer choices to the player at some point. The player makes a choice, and that will affect things. It will affect the outcome. You maybe saw that example I have of a conversation tree where, you can, King Midas can choose to be nice to this guard or be not so nice, and it affects, slightly the outcome of the scene. Somebody has to get their hands dirty and implement. Somebody has to structure that logic, right? That makes sense, right? The Twine, when you create your game in Twine, you have to direct the action there. You have to structure the flow, structure the sequence, structure the logic. Now, Twine, I think, does an excellent job of making that easier for you. If you've never done it before, there'll be a bit of a learning curve, but that's okay. You will figure it out. We're not. The answer: are we programmers? No. Yes. Maybe. I don't know. Not really. The programmers are people who create these tools, usually like Twine. Okay, and people like us, we go in there to create our scenes and our stories and structure the logic. But they make it very easy for us. You may still have to get your hands a little bit dirty with with the logic, but it's more like scripting than programming. What scripting? I mean by scripting. Scripting, I think, is kind of like diet programming. It's not really programming, but we do have to make sure the game behaves the way that we want it to. Tells the story the way our interactive story unfolds the way we designed it to, and that takes some work. Don't be intimidated. Absolutely don't be intimidated. You'll figure it out. If you use something like Twine, there's lots of tutorials and resources. It'll become second nature, and it'll be part of the job when you're working at a studio. And hopefully they'll have some really nice tools that make that part of the job much easier for you than it much easier for you. Okay? Don't be intimidated. I did it. And I look like someone who just lost all their money to gambling this morning. I don't know why I said that. I don't gamble. All right. That's it. Okay? Hopefully you can hang on to that and remember that, if things get tricky with your first attempt at using a tool or something like that, or if you've been frustrated before, I'm just here to tell you you'll absolutely figure it out 100%. I believe in you. You're a graduate of Video Game Writing 101, right? There's nothing you can't do now. All right. Take care. Have a good week.